Christine de Pizan was 4 when her father moved her from northern Italy to France. Her father got a job with the royal court as a doctor, astrologer, general, smart guy. She grew up there in that environment, very sophisticated, the height of society, very elite, and she was even more special in that she was taught to read. Her father believed in astrology, so, qualified, but he very much believed in educating his daughters as well as his sons. Good for him. At 15, she was married to a young functionary in the administration, a guy named Etienne du Castel. And about 9 years after that, her father died. And 1 year after her father died, her husband died, leaving her with 3 kids, I think control over or responsibility for maybe some nieces and nephews, her own mother, and in a foreign country. So she had to figure out what to do. She became what a lot of people will bandy about as the first female professional writer in France. There's a lot of qualifications. Sometimes she'll be called the first professional writer, sometimes the first female professional writer, but all of those get complicated. Basically, she was left on her own to support herself and her family. And she did it the only way she knew how, which was writing. Very well educated. She actually had that option. Think of how many women did that. She starts out with short things because she just got some bills coming in. She's got to start selling. It's not necessarily like she went out, she got a book contract. This is all just for the support, the patronage of the aristocrats around her. The king who had hired her dad had since died. That was, I think, Charles V. And his son turned out to be quite insane and a little bit of a jerk besides. And he would take long periods of time where he'd just disappear, just check out for a little while. Poor guy, the stress had just got to him. He needed a lot of vacations. And in that time, the king's wife was often stepping in and saying, well, okay, the king's just having a bad day today. So let's not bother him. Why don't you just tell me what your problem is or what the issue is, and either I'll deal with it or wink, wink. I'll go in and I'll discuss it with him and then come back with the answer. And that's how France was run for quite some time, while Christine was knocking around the royal court. So she knew that the queen was the key to her survival. She knew also that the queen had a similar background to her. The queen was also from a different country. I think she was from Germany, Bavaria. Isabeau was her name. And if you can get in with the queen, you were in. So between her own desperation to support herself and her family and her keen sensibility of the political salience of being like the Queen and inviting that kind of empathy, she was able to carve out a nice little career for herself. And she starts it with short poems. This is not in your book. You don't have to look for it. This is Middle French. You do not have to know it. I put it up here so that you can get a sense of the form of what she's doing. Remember, the form is often intentionally difficult and complicated, but it's only supposed to hint at the reality within. So we're supposed to look at the outward form of something and deduce what the meaning is. So here, comme tertre suis sans pain per toute soulette, et comme brebis sans pasteur escarré, car par la mort fus jadis séparé de mon douce père, quoi tout er regrette. Now, we'll go over the meaning in a second, but just a couple of things I'm going to point out. Look at the rhymes. Soulette, regrette. A. Escarré, séparé. B. Then you go down here. 3 lines. Lassette rhymes with regrette. Intérieur, soulette. A. Souffrette, démorie, durie, met, soulette. A. And that line, comme tertre suis sans per toute soulette, is a refrain. It appears 3 times throughout. So it's sort of a game, it's sort of a puzzle, this poem. It's setting up this very rigid structure and trying to see, well, okay, what can I do within those very tight bounds? Now, significantly, let's take a look at, there are a couple of translations here. Neither one of them are particularly good, but I am like a solitary, mateless dove, a ewe without pasture, lost alone, for death has cleft me from my own, my sweet mate, whom I did love. 'Tis 7 years since death did remove my love, better if I had died, I own. I'm like a solitary, mateless dove, for since then but grieving I approve, and in my misery must weep and moan, nor have I hope, such harshness am I shown, that I'll find solace, or may joyful prove, I'm like a solitary, mateless dove. A little sad, a little whiny perhaps. Snap out of it, come on. Yes, your husband died, life sucks, get on with it. Mateless dove, this is that word there, tertre. You might recognize it. It looks a little like turtle. It's a turtle dove, which has literary symbolic significance of being a symbol of a kind of lost love. Here, she is advertising that she has been widowed. Her husband has died. Solitary, lost dove, a ewe without pasture, basically a lamb without a shepherd. Somebody to guide her, to help her, to rule over her, but yeah. All advertising that sense of bereavement. Now, this would have been produced for circulation within the royal court, where it probably would have found its way into the hands of the Queen Queen Isabeau, whose husband, while alive, frequently just took a powder, abandoned her in a different way, left her alone in a foreign nation to deal with all the problems that he just couldn't be bothered to. So all of this, while sounding a little desperate, perhaps, again, you're seeing, always coming back to those lines, I'm like a solitary mateless dove. This is all a signal saying, hey, Queen Isabeau, you and me, we're in the same boat. Your husband just flakes off every now and then. And, you know, that's terrible for you because it's leaving you alone. But I've been left alone too. And it's kind of heartbreaking to read about that and see the depth of the suffering going on there. You can't help but sympathize. The repetition of that refrain, I'm like a solitary mateless dove, comme toute puissance et toute soulette. Repeating it 3 different times. Well, repeating it twice, technically, because the first time is the first time. What is the effect of that? When that one line just gets drilled home that many times. Yes, I get it. She's lonely. She's mourning. Is it anger at this development? Is it a challenge? How could this have happened to me? Why am I left alone? What kind of a God would do this? Depends on how much spin you put on those lines, but the driving home of it calls attention to itself. It could also be submission. A big part of the grieving process, for those of you who have lost someone, is recognizing that no matter how angry you get, no matter how lonely you feel, nothing you do will change that. It's always going to come back to being soulette, alone. And so repeating that again and again and again reminds you that there is no escape from this. You must submit to it, and through that submission, find a way forward. Because otherwise, you're just always circling back to this line, circling back to the ugly reality, the suffering, the unfairness of it all. There is a great emotion packed into these tight rhymes. There's a great suffering, human soul packed into the exact and exacting lines. This is reading. This is her particular gift. She is waving this in front of the queen, yes, hoping for a little support, a little help. I got kids to feed. 24, I think, maybe 25 when her husband died. 3 kids, I think. So she is doing that, but at the same time, you can see a little resentment, a little bit of rebellion, a little questioning of, does this have to be this way? And on that, she's also making the appeal to the queen, because the queen might be having those exact same doubts. The queen, who is at the head of, or at least one rung below the head of her society, and obviously has a lot invested in maintaining the status quo of the system. But the queen would feel that same sense of constriction and rage within that system. Christine de Pizan wrote a lot of poems, many similar like this, similar to this, in that those early years after her husband died, for the explicit purpose of currying favor and patronage and getting some money, some support. But in that, she's also finding a voice. She's also finding a purpose. She's also finding an agenda for what her writing can do. Because she is also in this demonstrating how crucial her skills are, how well honed her literary sensibilities are, her ability to express herself is. By doing that, she is, yes, making an appeal and saying, I'm valuable to have around, you want me around, I can write. But it's more than that, because she is bringing levels of significance and empathy to the project that you just don't see in ordinary little poetry that just comes and goes.